It happened on a quiet Sunday afternoon in my own living room. My grandson Tyler, 19 years old and full of fire, stormed through my bedroom door, demanding money for some concert tickets. I told him no. I had already given him $300 last month that he never paid back. His face twisted with rage, and before I could blink, his hand shot out and grabbed my collar, yanking me forward so hard my neck cracked. My breath caught in my throat, not from fear, but from pure shock. I was 72 years old, and my own grandson had just put his hands on me like I was some stranger on the street. Before I could even process what happened, his mother, my daughter-in-law Amanda, appeared in the doorway. She stood there with her arms crossed, watching the whole thing unfold. I waited for her to say something, to defend me, to pull her son back. Instead, she sighed and said, "Dad, just let it go. He's young and stressed. Don't make this into something bigger than it is." My heart sank into my stomach. That moment, standing there with my collar still twisted in Tyler's fist, I realized something terrible. Respect in my own house was completely gone. That evening, we all sat around the dinner table like nothing had happened. The silence was thick enough to choke on. Tyler slouched in his chair, scrolling through his phone with one hand while shoveling mashed potatoes into his mouth with the other. Every few minutes, he would smirk in my direction, like we shared some private joke. Except the joke was on me. Amanda kept her eyes on her plate, cutting her chicken into smaller and smaller pieces, but barely eating any of it. My son Derek hadn't even bothered to come home for dinner. He texted Amanda saying he had to work late again. I knew that was a lie. He was avoiding me, avoiding the conflict brewing in his own house. I stared at the empty chair where my wife Margaret used to sit, and I felt her absence like a physical weight pressing down on my chest. She would have never allowed this kind of disrespect to fester. But Margaret had been gone for 5 years now, and without her, this family had lost its center. Nobody spoke about the collar grab. Nobody apologized. The silence felt louder than any shouting match ever could. After dinner, I sat alone on the back porch, wrapped in my old wool jacket against the October chill. The stars were just starting to come out, and I found myself thinking about my own father. He had been a stern man, a factory worker who came home every night smelling like oil and metal. But he never raised his hand to me, never had to. A single look of disappointment from him was enough to make me straighten up and fix whatever I had done wrong. I respected him with every fiber of my being, not because I feared him, but because he had earned it through his consistency, his fairness, his unwavering principles. Somewhere along the line, that chain of respect had been broken in my own family. I wondered if it was my fault. Had I been too soft with Derek when he was growing up? Had I given Tyler too many second chances, too much money, too much freedom without consequences? My chest tightened with a mixture of anger and shame. The shame burned hotter than the anger, because deep down I knew I had let this happen. The next morning, I woke up determined to address what happened. I found Tyler in the kitchen, making himself a massive breakfast sandwich with ingredients I had bought with my pension money. I cleared my throat and asked him to sit down. He rolled his eyes but sat across from me at the table, still holding his sandwich. I kept my voice calm and steady. I told him that grabbing me by the collar was unacceptable, that it crossed a line that should never be crossed between family members. I explained that I loved him, but I would not tolerate being physically disrespected in my own home. Tyler stared at me for a moment, and then he laughed. Actually laughed, like I had just told him the funniest joke he had ever heard. He leaned back in his chair, tossed his baseball cap onto the table, and said, "Grandpa, you're old. Don't take everything so serious. It wasn't even that hard." His words sliced through me deeper than his grip on my collar had. That laugh replayed in my head for the rest of the day, echoing in every quiet moment. Later that afternoon, I tried talking to Amanda again. She was in the laundry room, folding clothes with mechanical precision, each shirt getting the exact same 3 folds. I started explaining how Tyler's behavior was escalating, how it needed to be addressed before it got worse. She interrupted me before I could finish my second sentence. "Dad, boys will be boys." He didn't mean anything by it. You know how teenagers are, all hormones and attitude. Please don't drag this out and make it into some big family drama. Her tone wasn't gentle or understanding. It was sharp, defensive, like I was attacking her personally by criticizing her son. I felt the floor tilt slightly under my feet, like I was standing on a ship in rough water. Was I really the problem here? Was I overreacting to something that everyone else considered normal? That night, lying in bed staring at the ceiling, I made a decision. I would not let this slide. I would not shrink myself to make them comfortable. Something had shifted inside me, and there was no going back. 2 days later, I went to the bank to check on my small savings account. It was nothing much, just about $4,000 I had been setting aside over the years for my funeral expenses. I didn't want to be a burden on anyone when my time came. I wanted to pay for my own casket, my own plot next to Margaret, my own headstone. The bank teller handed me a printed statement, and my stomach dropped straight through the floor. There had been a withdrawal I never authorized. $2,200, gone. I asked to see the transaction details, my hands shaking as I held the paper. The withdrawal had been made at an ATM across town using my card. I checked the date and time, and my blood ran cold. That was the same day Tyler had asked to borrow my car to run errands. I had given him my wallet to get gas money, trusting him completely. The teller asked if I wanted to report the fraud, and I couldn't even answer. My own grandson had stolen from me. That evening, I called my son Derek. My fingers fumbled with the phone buttons, my hands still trembling from what I had discovered at the bank. Derek answered on the fifth ring, sounding distracted and tired. I explained everything as clearly as I could. The collar grab, the disrespect, the stolen money, the way Amanda kept brushing aside my concerns. I told him I needed him to step up as a father and a son, to address this situation before it destroyed what was left of our family. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Then Derek sighed, long and heavy, like I had just asked him to move a mountain with his bare hands. Dad, please don't start drama right now. I've got enough stress at work without you adding more. Tyler's just going through a phase. All kids steal from their parents at some point. We'll figure it out later, okay? He hung up before I could respond. I sat there holding the dead phone, feeling more alone than I had felt since Margaret's funeral. That night, sleep wouldn't come. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, watching the shadows from the streetlight outside dance across the plaster. Margaret's picture sat on the nightstand beside me, her smile frozen in time from our 40th anniversary party. She had always been the peacemaker in our family, the one who could smooth over any argument, who could make everyone feel heard and valued. She had this gift of making people want to be better versions of themselves. Without her, I was just an old man taking up space in a house that no longer felt like home. My chest ached with a different kind of pain than the usual arthritis and old injuries. This was betrayal, pure and simple, and it hurt worse than any physical wound I had ever suffered. I whispered into the darkness, "What would you do, Margaret? How would you handle this?" But the only answer was silence and the distant sound of Tyler's music thumping through the walls. The next morning, Tyler brushed past me in the narrow hallway between the kitchen and the bathroom. He didn't accidentally bump into me. He deliberately shoulder-checked me, hard enough that I stumbled sideways and had to catch myself against the wall. As he walked away, he looked back over his shoulder and grinned. "Careful, Grandpa. Don't want you to trip and break a hip." His voice dripped with mock concern that fooled nobody. My fists clenched at my sides, my whole body tensing with rage I hadn't felt in decades. But I said nothing. I forced myself to take slow, deep breaths and let him walk away. That was the moment I truly understood what was happening. Tyler wasn't just being disrespectful. He was enjoying it. He was testing me, pushing boundaries, seeing how much he could get away with. He wanted to watch me shrink, wanted to break my spirit the way you break a wild horse. But I had survived 72 years on this earth, including 2 tours in Vietnam and 40 years in factories that ate men alive. I had no intention of breaking now. Over the next few days, I made a decision. I would play along with their expectations. I stopped confronting Tyler about his behavior. I stopped bringing up the stolen money to Derek and Amanda. I acted like the tired, fragile old man they all seemed to want me to be. I shuffled a little more when I walked. I let my voice get quieter and less certain. But every night after they all went to bed, I sat at the small desk in my room with pen and paper, making careful notes. I wrote down every detail I could remember about my bank accounts, my pension, the title to this house that I had paid off 15 years ago. I documented every theft, every insult, every moment of disrespect with dates and times. I pulled out the folder where I kept my will, the one I had written shortly after Margaret died. I read through it carefully, noting which parts needed to change. I wasn't going to fight Tyler with my fists or my voice. I was going to fight him with something much more powerful than that. The following week, I made an appointment with my old lawyer, Mr. Kane. His office was downtown in one of those old brick buildings that had been there since before the war. The elevator creaked and groaned as it carried me up to the third floor. Mr. Kane was older than me by a few years, but his mind was still sharp as a tack. He remembered me from when I first came to him about retirement paperwork and estate planning after Margaret passed. I sat in the leather chair across from his massive oak desk and told him everything. The collar grab, the stolen money, the complete lack of respect or consequences. I told him about Derek's refusal to address the situation and Amanda's constant protection of Tyler's behavior. Mr. Kane listened without interrupting, just nodding occasionally and scribbling notes on his yellow legal pad. When I finished, he set down his pen and leaned forward, his weathered hands folded on the desk. Tim, if they don't respect you in life, you can make damn sure they learn respect after death. Those words planted a seed in my mind that took root immediately. Over the next 2 weeks, Mr. Kane and I completely rewrote my will. Everything I owned, every penny of my pension and savings, the title to the house, all of it was moved into an ironclad trust with very specific instructions. Derek could continue living in the house after I died, but only under one condition. Tyler could never live there, never inherit any portion of it, never benefit from it in any way. If Derek violated this condition, the house would be sold and all proceeds would go to the Veterans Association and the local food bank. My remaining savings, after funeral expenses, would be split between 3 charities Margaret had loved. Tyler's name was completely erased from every document, every clause, every mention of inheritance. The day I signed those papers, sitting in Mr. Kane's office with a witness present, I felt like I could breathe fully for the first time in months. The ink was still wet on the signature line, and I knew with absolute certainty that I had just taken back control of my life and my legacy. For once, I was not a victim. I was not helpless. But Tyler wasn't done pushing boundaries and taking what didn't belong to him. One afternoon in late November, I noticed something missing from my dresser. My old wristwatch, the one my father had given me when I turned 18, was gone. It wasn't expensive or fancy, just a simple Timex with a leather band that had been replaced 4 times over the decades. But it was the last physical connection I had to my father, who had died 30 years ago. I searched everywhere, tearing apart my room, checking under furniture, going through drawers twice. Nothing. That night, I was walking past Tyler's room when I heard him laughing and talking loudly. Through his half-open door, I could see him taking selfies in his mirror, posing and making faces. And there on his wrist was my watch. My father's watch. My watch. He was showing it off like a trophy. Rage boiled up inside me so hot and fierce I thought I might pass out. But I forced myself to walk away, forced myself to stay quiet. Every theft, every insult, every act of disrespect was becoming evidence in a case I was building. The following Sunday, we had what passed for family dinner in this broken household. Derek had actually shown up for once, though he spent most of the meal checking his phone under the table. Amanda served pot roast that was dry and overcooked, but nobody complained. We were halfway through the meal when Tyler suddenly slammed his fist down on the table, making all the plates and glasses jump. "Why won't you just give me the car keys? I need to go out tonight." His voice was loud and aggressive, directed at me. I had told him earlier that day that he couldn't borrow my truck because he had returned it last time with an empty gas tank and a new dent in the bumper. I kept my voice calm and repeated that the answer was no. Tyler's face turned red, and he started shouting about how unfair I was, how I never let him do anything, how I was ruining his life. Before I could respond, Amanda jumped in. "Dad, why do you always have to provoke him? Just give him the keys and avoid all this drama." I looked around the table at my family. My son staring at his phone. My daughter-in-law glaring at me like I was the villain. My grandson seething with entitlement. Not one of them had my back. The next morning, I started a quiet rebellion. I stopped cooking breakfast for everyone like I had been doing every day for the past 3 years. I stopped doing the grocery shopping. I stopped folding the laundry that Amanda left in piles on the couch. I stopped driving people to appointments or picking up prescriptions. All the little invisible tasks I had been doing to keep the household running smoothly, all the things nobody ever thanked me for, I simply stopped doing them. Within 3 days, the house started falling apart. Dishes piled up in the sink because Amanda refused to do them and Tyler certainly wasn't going to. The refrigerator got emptier and emptier. Derek started complaining about having no clean shirts for work. Amanda snapped at Tyler for leaving his clothes everywhere. The tension in the house thickened like humidity before a storm. I watched it all unfold from my chair in the living room, reading my library books and drinking my coffee. The chaos was oddly satisfying. They were finally feeling the weight of my absence, finally realizing how much I had been holding together. But this was only the beginning of my plan. A week later, I returned to the bank. This time, I asked to speak directly with the branch manager, Mrs. Patterson. She was a serious woman in her 50s with kind eyes and a no-nonsense attitude. I sat across from her desk and explained the situation carefully. My grandson had stolen money from my account by using my debit card without permission. I showed her the statement with the unauthorized withdrawal highlighted. I explained that I had trusted him with my wallet to get gas money, and he had betrayed that trust completely. Mrs. Patterson's expression hardened as she listened. "Mr. Reynolds, what your grandson did is fraud. This is a serious crime." She made several phone calls while I sat there, and by the end of our meeting, she had arranged for Tyler to be called into the bank for a formal interview. 3 days later, Tyler and I both sat in a small conference room at the bank. Mrs. Patterson laid out the evidence calmly and professionally. Tyler's face went from cocky to confused to bright red as he realized he had been caught. He stammered and stuttered, finally admitting in a quiet voice that he had taken the money without asking. Mrs. Patterson warned him in front of me that any future incidents would result in criminal charges and a permanent fraud flag on his record. I didn't smile or gloat, but inside, a small fire of justice began to burn brighter. When Amanda found out about the bank meeting, she exploded. I was sitting in my room reading when she burst through my door without knocking. Her face was purple with rage, her hands shaking as she pointed at me. "How dare you embarrass Tyler like that? How dare you treat him like a criminal in public? He's family, for God's sake. You've humiliated us." I set down my book and looked at her calmly. I let her rage run its course, let her words bounce off me like rain off a window. When she finally stopped to catch her breath, I spoke quietly but clearly. "Amanda, family doesn't steal from family. Family doesn't grab family by the collar. Family doesn't show disrespect and expect no consequences. Tyler made his choices. Now he gets to live with them." The silence that followed was heavier than her shouting had been. She stared at me like she was seeing a stranger, someone she didn't recognize. Then she turned and stormed out of my room, slamming the door so hard that a picture frame fell off my wall. I picked it up carefully. It was a photo of Margaret holding baby Tyler at his christening, both of them smiling at the camera. The glass had cracked right down the middle. That night, I felt a sharp, stabbing pain in my chest. I was sitting on the edge of my bed, getting ready to lie down, when suddenly my whole left side seized up. The pain radiated down my arm and up into my jaw. I couldn't breathe properly, couldn't call out for help. I gripped my shirt, gasping, thinking this might actually be the end. I had survived so much in my life, but maybe this was finally it. Tyler walked past my room at that exact moment, his door open, music blasting from his headphones. He glanced in my direction, saw me hunched over and struggling, and kept walking. Didn't stop, didn't ask if I was okay, didn't even pause. After about 5 minutes that felt like 5 hours, the pain started to ease. My breathing returned to normal. My heart rate slowed down. I realized it had been a panic attack, not a heart attack, though the symptoms felt identical. But the real heart attack was the realization that if I had actually been dying in that moment, Tyler wouldn't have cared enough to check on me. That truth gave me even more determination to see my plan through to the end. The next day, I went to the hardware store and bought a small fireproof lockbox. It cost me $60, money I could barely spare, but it was worth every penny. Back at home, I gathered all my important documents. The new will, the trust papers, my bank statements, photos of Margaret, my father's military medals, the deed to the house, my life insurance policy. Everything that mattered, everything that proved who I was and what I had built, went into that box. I locked it with a combination only I knew, and then I hid it under a loose floorboard in my closet that I had discovered years ago. I covered the spot with an old rug and some boxes. If Tyler went snooping through my room looking for things to steal, he wouldn't find anything of value. For the first time in months, I felt like my life was secure, like my secrets belonged only to me. But in the back of my mind, I kept wondering what would happen when they finally discovered what I had done, when they read that will, and saw Tyler's name completely absent. In mid-December, I decided it was time for a family meeting. I sent a text to Derek asking him to make sure everyone was home on Saturday evening. I didn't explain why, just said it was important. When Saturday came, I sat in the living room and waited. Derek, Amanda, and Tyler eventually gathered, all looking annoyed at having their plans interrupted. I had rehearsed what I wanted to say, but now that the moment had arrived, my mouth felt dry. I cleared my throat and began. I want you all to know that I've been updating my affairs. My will, my estate, all of it has been reorganized. I saw their faces light up immediately, probably thinking I was about to hand them a detailed breakdown of their inheritance. Derek actually sat up straighter. Amanda leaned forward with interest. Tyler stopped scrolling his phone. Then I said the words I had been waiting months to say. Tyler will not inherit a single thing from me. Not the house, not money, nothing. He has proven through his actions that he doesn't deserve it. The room went completely silent. You could have heard a pin drop on the carpet. Amanda's jaw literally dropped open. Tyler cursed under his breath. Derek just stared at the floor like he wanted it to swallow him up. Tyler broke the silence by jumping to his feet. You can't do that. This is my house too. I've lived here my whole life. His voice cracked with rage and disbelief. I stayed seated, stayed calm, kept my hands folded in my lap. This is my house, Tyler. I paid for it. My name is on the deed, and I can leave it to whoever I choose. Amanda started crying, actual tears streaming down her face. How can you be so cruel? He's your grandson, your own blood. What kind of monster punishes a child like this? I looked at her steadily. Tyler is 19 years old. He's not a child. He's a young man who made adult choices. He chose to steal from me, to put his hands on me, to disrespect me in my own home. These are the consequences. Derek finally spoke up, his voice weak and defeated. Dad, maybe we can talk about this later when everyone's calmer. But there would be no later conversation that would change my mind. The decision was made, the papers were signed, the locks were on my secrets. That night, I knew the storm would hit my room again. And I was right. Tyler came to my room around midnight. He didn't knock, just burst through the door like a tornado. This time he didn't just grab my collar. He actually shoved me backward onto my bed, his face twisted with a rage I had never seen before. You're ruining everything. You're destroying this family because you're a bitter old man who can't stand to see anyone happy. He was shouting directly into my face, his breath hot and angry. My heart was pounding, but I kept my voice steady and quiet. No, Tyler, you ruined everything yourself. You chose theft over honesty. You chose violence over respect. You chose entitlement over gratitude. I'm just making sure there are consequences for those choices. He raised his hand like he might actually hit me, and for a second I thought he would. But then he seemed to realize what he was doing, seemed to see the line he was about to cross. He stormed out of my room, slamming the door so hard that I heard something crack in the frame. I sat on the edge of my bed, my whole body shaking. That's when I knew exactly what I had to do next. The next morning, I called the police non-emergency line. My hands were steady as I dialed. A calm female officer answered, and I explained everything clearly. My grandson had physically assaulted me, shoved me onto my bed during an argument. This wasn't the first time he had put his hands on me. I gave her the date of the collar grab incident as well. She asked if I wanted to press charges, and I said not yet, but I wanted a formal report filed. She took down all the information and gave me a case number. I wrote that number down carefully and added it to my fireproof lockbox under the floorboard. Tyler was now officially on record with the police. If he ever touched me again, there would be documentation of a pattern. My revenge wasn't loud or dramatic. It wasn't about yelling or fighting back physically. It was quiet, methodical, strategic. I was building a case against Tyler piece by piece, document by document. And methodical revenge, I knew from my years in the military, always lands the hardest because people never see it coming until it's too late. As winter turned to spring, Tyler's life started unraveling in ways he couldn't quite understand. He applied for his first credit card and was denied. The bank flagged his application because of the fraud report on file. He tried to get approved for a car loan and was rejected for the same reason. His college applications for the next semester were delayed because there were unresolved financial issues attached to his name. He stormed around the house, breaking things, punching walls, cursing at everyone. Amanda cried constantly, begging me to fix it somehow, to make it all go away. Derek started drinking more, coming home late, avoiding the chaos. I simply sat in my chair by the window, reading my books, drinking my coffee, watching the consequences bloom like weeds in a neglected garden. The walls Tyler had built around his arrogance were crumbling brick by brick. His friends started avoiding him because he was always angry. His girlfriend broke up with him because he was too intense. Everything he had taken for granted was slipping through his fingers. And I watched it all unfold with a quiet sense of justice that felt like warm sunlight on my face after a long, cold winter. Last month, I made my final visit to Mr. Kane's office. We reviewed every document one last time, making sure everything was absolutely airtight. The trust was sealed, the house protected, my wishes clearly documented. Everything I owned would go exactly where I wanted it to go, and Tyler's name was nowhere to be found in any of it. I also added one final element. I wrote a letter, sealed it in an envelope, and gave it to Mr. Kane with instructions that it be read aloud to the family immediately after my death, before any will or trust documents were discussed. In that letter, I detailed every theft, every insult, every act of violence and disrespect. I explained my decisions calmly and clearly, and I ended with these words that I had thought about for a very long time. Tyler, respect is not something you inherit. It is something you earn through your actions and your character. You chose to steal from me, to put your hands on me, to treat me like I was worthless. These were your choices, not mine. Now you must live with the consequences of those choices for the rest of your life. I hope someday you understand that family is not defined by blood alone, but by love, honor, and mutual respect. You failed to give me any of those things, so you will receive none of my legacy in return. Now I sit in this house every day, calm and quiet. Tyler avoids me completely, won't even look at me when we pass in the hallway. Amanda glares at me like I'm a monster who destroyed her son's future. Derek says almost nothing, just moves through the house like a ghost. But deep down, all three of them know that I hold all the power now. They know that everything they assumed they would inherit is no longer theirs to claim. One day, when I'm gone, they will sit in Mr. Kane's office and listen to my letter being read aloud. Tyler will finally understand the full weight of his actions, and I will no longer be there to see his face, but I imagine it clearly. The shock, the rage, the regret. Until that day comes, I smile quietly to myself. I drink my coffee on the porch. I read my books. I visit Margaret's grave every Sunday. Revenge doesn't always roar with thunder and lightning. Sometimes it whispers with patience and planning. And my whisper will outlive me, echoing in this family long after I'm buried next to my wife. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left.